Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Tom's Gadget Garage. Today I am super pumped because I'm going to be kicking off a new review series on the first mid-drive electric bike I've ever featured on this channel. Now in the past I've covered a ton of e-bikes, but every single one of those has been a hub drive e-bike. And for very good reason. Mid-drives are generally speaking very cost prohibitive. Usually the high 2000s, $3,000, $4,000 plus dollars, which takes it out of that budget friendly category that I usually focus on this channel. So the bike that we're going to be looking at today is the HeyBike Alpha, and I actually had the opportunity to check this bike out at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas this past January, and it was actually at that event where they unveiled this bike for the first time. And unfortunately they didn't have very much in the way of pricing. They just said it was going to be very competitively priced, and I thought to myself, competitively priced, a mid-drive bike where it's like $2,500 or something, right? As it turns out, this bike, as of the filming of this video, is priced between $1,500 and $1,600, which I'll tell you right now, in terms of mid-drives in today's market, is almost unheard of. So what I'm going to be doing today is a feature overview as well as first impressions ride, and then I'm going to follow up all of this content with a full range test. We'll do a hill climb test, we'll cruise around the city, I'm going to rack up hundreds of miles on this thing, and then we're going to bring it all together in a comprehensive end-to-end review. Now full disclosure, HeyBike did send this to me for review purposes, but as always, all thoughts, opinions, and conclusions are my own. And if at the end of all of this you decide you want to pick one of these things up, I will include a link as well as any available coupons in the description below. So, without further delay, let's jump into the details. Alright folks, so to start us off with some high-level stats, this HeyBike Alpha does weigh in on my commercial scale at 72.9 pounds. Now that 72.9 pounds is the entire weight of this bike, including the battery. The battery itself weighs in at 7.4 pounds, and that's going to be important, especially if you plan on carrying this bike on a bike rack, because a lot of times bike racks have very set limits for carrying capacity. And for example, my Hollywood Racks Destination E supports bikes up to 70 pounds. And so in order to get this below that 70-pound threshold, I would just pop that battery out, throw it in the back seat of my car, and we're good to go. The maximum load or carrying capacity of this bike is 400 pounds, which includes the weight of the rider as well as any cargo you might be carrying around. One of the first things you might notice about this bike is the fact that it's got these gigantic tires. So these are 26-inch by 4-inch fat tires, and as you can see here, we do have knobby tread, which is going to be great for riding both on and off the beaten path. And taking a look at the sidewalls here, it does say to inflate the tires to 20 psi. Here at the back of the bike, we do have this bolt-on rear rack, which does come pre-installed. And one thing that I really like that HeyBike did here is they include this elastic tie-down strap, which is really nice because a lot of bikes out there come with these rear racks, but they don't come with any kind of tie downs. You'll be responsible for finding your own, so definitely a nice little touch. Just below the rack, we do have this rear fender. It is made of plastic, which is really nice because it helps dampen some of the pebbles and rocks that get kicked up in there. Also at the back of the bike is going to be our rear tail light and brake light combo, which also, get this, has integrated turn signals. Now if you're curious what those brake lights look like when I pull on the brake levers, it actually gets brighter for us. And then when I want to use my turn signals, there's the right, and there's the left. Now all the excitement doesn't end there because we also have a headlight up front, which, get this, also includes turn signal. So there's our right turn signal, and there's our left turn signal. An important thing to mention about turn signals on e-bikes is that they're more geared towards night riding. They're very visible at night, but usually difficult to see during the day because they often appear washed out. So if you are going to be riding around during the day, don't rely heavily on those turn signals. Definitely take advantage of your hand signals. Here we've got our Shimano Altus derailleur, which is a step above the tourney that we usually see on budget-oriented bikes. And just behind that, we do have our 8-gear cassette. And as I was mentioning earlier, this is a mid-drive bike, so no hub motor in the rear. Working our way forward, we do have our nicely padded saddle here, which does allow you to move it both forward and back. It also allows you to change the angle. And then working our way down, you will see here we've got a quick release for the seat height, and you do have nicely printed numbers here so that you always know where to adjust your seat. Here we've got a sticker that goes over some of the specs of the bike, and just below that, folks, look at that. we've got an official UL sticker because this bike is in fact UL certified. Below all those fancy stickers, we do have some mounting points for some accessories. And then as we zoom out a little bit here, you will see we've got our chainring, our cranks, as well as our aluminum pedals that do have some integrated pegs. Working our way up, you will see we've got this beautiful 6061 aluminum frame. And right here in the down tube is where your battery is going to be located, which I'm going to go over in a moment. At the front of the bike, we do have our front fork suspension, which does have lockout and preload, and that lockout dial is right here. So if you want to completely lock it out so there's a zero travel, you can do that, or you can leave it in its unlocked state, which will give you the full travel. And of course over here we've got our preload adjustment, which will help you set how soft or firm this suspension is. Between those suspension forks and above the tire is going to be this plastic front fender. This is not pre-installed. You actually have to install it yourself, which is really easy. Same with the headlight. You just bolt all these together and then you bolt them into the sides of the front forks and you're good to go. And of course we've got our 26" by 4" fat tire at the front. This here is our kickstand, which looks pretty robust and has the bike sitting at a nice angle. And of course the star of the show is our mid-drive motor. This is the Galaxy e-drive system from HeyBike, and it's actually made by Mivis. Now the motor on this mid-drive system is 500 watts, which might not sound like a whole lot, but on a mid-drive bike, 500 watts actually goes a long way. And in terms of torque, get this, 105 Newton meters of torque. A lot of 500 nominal watt hub drive bikes out there will crank out, 55, maybe 65 Newton meters of torque. With this, it's 105 Newton meters of torque. This thing is probably going to tear hills apart, which we're absolutely going to be testing. Something else to mention about this mid-drive system is that it does use a torque sensor, and with e-bikes you get two flavors. You get torque sensors, you get cadence sensors. Torque sensors use a pressure-based system, so the more pressure you apply to these pedals, the more output this bad boy is going to give you. Now, HeyBike does claim this bike will go up to 28 miles an hour, which we'll absolutely be putting to the test. And while we're down here, take a look at the welds on this bike. These things literally look like stacked dimes. Did a very good job on this frame. Here we've got our external charging port with a nice weatherproof cover. Here we've got a key slot as well as a pair of keys. And when you insert the key in here and turn it, that's actually how you remove the battery on this bike. So you don't actually need the key to operate the bike, it's just for battery removal purposes. If you want to remove the battery from the bike, all you've got to do is push down this lever on this little trim piece. This will pop right off. You can then remove it. Next, you'll go ahead and turn the key. You'll see that the battery pops out, and there's another lever here. You push this down, and you can actually pull the battery out and remove it from the bike. If you want to charge this battery separate from the bike, you can absolutely do so. As you can see, you've got a charge port here, and the charger on this bike is a 2-amp charger, so you're looking at charge times anywhere from 6 to 8 hours from 0% to 100%. This battery is a 13.5 amp hour battery at 48 volts, and HeyBike is claiming 680 watt hours of capacity, which should be good for a theoretical range of 60 miles, which we'll absolutely be putting to the test. All right, so working our way up to the cockpit here on the right-hand side, you will see we've got these rubber grips. They're pretty basic. They're not locking grips, so these things might twist around on you, especially on hotter days. Here we've got a nice little twist throttle, and then of course we've got our hydraulic brake levers here, which do have a very nice pull to them. And then of course we've got our trigger style, which is my favorite, gear shift with 8 gears to choose from. Here at the center we do have this glorious bright color display, which I'll tell you right now has got a load of information on it. Here at the top left we've got our battery represented by these bars. To the right of that, we've got battery represented as a percentage, which is a nice touch. We've also got a Bluetooth indicator letting us know we're connected to the app, which this bike does have one for optional use. We've got our speed readout as well as a graphical representation of speed as well as power. Just below that, we've got our odometer as well as our level of pedal assist, of which this bike has 5. But that's not all, folks. If we hit the mode button here on the control pad, you'll see we can toggle to our trip distance, our maximum speed, our average speed, our voltage. I can't tell you how many times I've reviewed bikes that have no voltage display. Voltage is a great way to gauge how much battery you have remaining. We've also got how many amps we're pulling, how many watts we're pushing through, as well as the elapsed time on the trip. So tons of information on this display. On the left-hand side of the handlebar, we do have our plus and minus buttons, which we'll use to control the levels of pedal assist that we're in. We've got our mode button. We've also got our turn signal button, as well as this horn. I'll do this horn on the first impressions ride because it is obnoxiously loud. But if you want to turn on the headlights on this bike, you push and hold the plus button, and there you go. You got our headlights. If you want to turn them off, you can push and hold. That'll turn them off. And then here you've got kind of a walk mode of sorts. You can push and hold the minus button, and that'll take you into that mode. Here we've got our left hand grip, which of course is not a locking grip. And then here we've got our left hydraulic brake lever. As I mentioned a moment ago, this bike does allow you to connect to the HeyBike app, but you can also go into the advanced menu system to change settings. And as you can see here, all I got to do is hold the plus and minus button. That'll take us into our P settings menu, and I can just go toggle through this using the plus and minus button. So I'll go to P08. P08 is going to be your speed setting. If I want to adjust that, I just hit the mode button, and then I can drop this down to 32. This is kilometers an hour, so if I want the max speed of the bike to be 20 miles an hour, I'll set it to 32 kilometers an hour. If I want it to be the full 28 miles an hour, I can set it to 45 kilometers an hour. I hit the menu button again, hit the plus and minus button to save and exit. And there you go, that's the P settings menu. If you're curious what the app looks like, well, here you go. It is connected to the app right now. You'll see we've got 100% battery. Just below that, it gives you the control over how many levels of pedal assist you want, how much you rode this week, how many hours you rode this week. You can look at a live map. You can actually come into here, go into the advanced menu system. You can change the bike name. You can allow other riders to use this bike. You can make some personalizations here, mostly units of measure as well as levels of pedal assist. So overall, it's a pretty basic app. You can do firmware updates, all that fun stuff. But anyways, if you want to use this, you absolutely can. You can even power off the bike from here, which is a nice little touch. Now, the final thing I want to mention about this mid-drive bike before we go into our first impressions ride is that this mid-drive motor is tied into the drivetrain of this bike. So what do I mean by that? Well, when this motor is running and you are pedaling, it is directly connected to the gears on the bike, which is part of the reason why mid-drive motors are more efficient. They're actually able to fully leverage all of the gears on the bike. And an important thing to mention about that is that it's going to change the way that you ride the bike, and so there's definitely some do's and don'ts, which we'll go over on our first impressions ride. And here's a quick demonstration of what that looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and get this spinning. Okay, and once we're going, I'm going to go ahead and hit the throttle, and as you can see, with this bike, that mid-drive is turning the crank, which in turn is turning the gears on the rear of the bike, causing that rear wheel to spin. With the hub drive system, it would be completely independent of your gears and chains. When you take into consideration the fact that this bike can crank out 105 Newton meters of torque, you quickly realize how important shifting is going to be, especially given the fact that the motor is actually driving the chain and gears. So we'll get into that in our first impressions ride. All right, folks, so I'm out here with the HeyBike Alpha, about to do our first impressions ride. And the first thing I'm going to go ahead and do is pedal this bike with zero motor assistance. Because there are situations where you might be out on a ride and you run out of power, and you're going to have to pedal this without any assistance from the bike. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. I am in gear 1, pedal assist level 0. And once we get started, it's actually really easy to pedal. So right now we're cruising around about 8 miles an hour. I'll go ahead and switch over to gear 2. All right, so if you run out of power, this is actually a relatively easy bike to pedal without any kind of motor assistance. We're cruising around about 10, 11 miles an hour right now. Now, because this is a mid-drive bike, when you're using pedal assistance and you're getting off to a start, you're always going to want to ensure that you're starting from a low gear, preferably the lowest gear. That's going to reduce the strain that you put on the drivetrain. So we'll go ahead and demonstrate that now. I'm going to go ahead and drop into gear 1. All right. I'm going to go ahead and crank up our pedal assist to level 1, gear 1, and we are off to the races, and power is immediate. That's one thing I like about this mid-drive setup with the torque sensor, is that you get immediate power delivery and it's very smooth. So right now, pedal assist 1. When you change gears, you're going to want to go ahead and pause your pedaling, change gears, and then resume your pedaling. Part of the reason for that is that this mid-drive motor has a ton of torque, and the last thing you want to do is engage that motor, engage that chain when you're in the middle of a gear shift. And we're cruising. This is pedal assist 1, very comfortable. I'm going to go ahead and switch gears again. And because this is a torque sensor, if I want more power, all I've got to do is press on those pedals harder. It's basically a pressure-based system. So the more pressure I apply to the pedals, the more output we're going to get from that motor. And so here we are cruising around, pedal assist 1. I'm going to go ahead and pause my pedaling, move up into another gear. And there we go. Much more comfortable. So right now, we're cruising around at about 18 miles an hour in pedal assist 1. Go ahead and crank it into pedal assist 2. You can definitely feel extra assistance there. So less effort on my part. I'm going to go ahead and pause my pedaling, shift up a gear, and continue on. And wow, this thing's got really good pickup. You can immediately feel that torque and acceleration. All right, we're going to go ahead and bump it up into pedal assist 3. Now it's a little more effort on the bike's part, a little less effort on my part. And as I mentioned before, this bike has 5 levels of pedal assist. So the higher you go in assistance level, the more work the bike is going to be putting in on your behalf. Now, when you slow down on a bike like this, you're also going to want to shift down in gears. And so I'm lightly pressing the pedals right now, shifting down. And we are now in gear 3, and we're cruising. So as you can see, a bike like this definitely drives different than your typical hub drive bike. You're more engaged with the gears. It's more akin to driving a car with a manual transmission. And so I mentioned, as you're pedaling, the motor's engaged, and you want to switch gears, you just, pause your pedaling. You could also gently pull on this brake lever. That'll engage the motor cutoff. And by gently pulling on this, you'll ensure that, you don't actually engage the brakes. And then you can also switch that way. So if you're not a big fan of, pausing your pedaling to shift, you could also use that technique. It just takes a little more practice. All right. So we're coming to a stop here. I'm in a lower gear. Coast is clear. Go ahead and pedal on out. But one thing to mention, with this bike is that with this torque sensor and this mid-drive setup, you've got very smooth and immediate power delivery. You don't have a lot of those delays that you have with, hub drive bikes, where you're pedaling, a quarter or a half turn or more before the motor engages. You've got torque sensor hub drive bikes, which are much better, much smaller delays, more similar to this. But with the mid-drive, that power delivery is immediate. Another way that you can shift this bike is, right now the motor is engaging because I'm putting power down and pressure down on those pedals. However, if I lighten the pressure, the motor will disengage and I can shift gears that way, and then I can reapply pressure as well. So you've basically got 3 techniques that you can use. You can pause your pedaling, shift the gear, resume your pedaling. You can gently pull the brake lever and then make your shift and then continue going. Or you can light up the pressure on the actual pedals, which will disengage the motor, and you can make your shift that way, just like I did right now. So multiple ways you can do it, just a matter of finding, which one is most suitable for you. All right, so we're in pedal assist 3 right now. I'm gonna go ahead and lighten up the load on the pedals, make my shift, and then resume the pressure on the pedals, and we're moving. That power kicks in immediately. And I'm not ghost pedaling or anything right now. I'm not even in the highest gear, so this bike is geared very well. I'm gonna go ahead and lighten up the load, resume pedaling. And we're cruising around, 24, 25 miles an hour right now, very easily. Nowhere near any kind of ghost pedaling at all whatsoever. And that's fantastic. Obviously, we'll take this on a top speed test when we get to some open roads, but so far, really nice bike to pedal around. If you're the type of person that likes pedaling a bike, this is going to be fantastic. If you love using throttle on a bike, you might not be as excited. I'm gonna go over that here in a moment. All right, so as I was mentioning, the throttle on this bike is different than a throttle that you'd typically find on a hub drive bike. And I'm gonna go ahead and explain why. I'm gonna go ahead and shift down to gear 1. If I go ahead and try and engage this throttle, look what happens. A whole lot of nothing. Nothing happens at all. With this bike, you have to be moving at least 5 miles an hour to get that motor to engage. So now I've got the throttle in and we're cruising about 7 miles an hour or so. And an important thing to mention is that the speed is not governed by the level of pedal assist that you're in, but the actual gear that you're in. So right now, 7 miles an hour, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and pedal a little bit. We'll go into gear 2. We've officially shifted. Now I'm gonna apply the throttle. Watch our speed. About 8.5 miles an hour. I'm gonna go ahead, pedal a little bit, shift, engage the throttle. We're in gear 3. Now we're maintaining about 9, almost 10 miles an hour. Now we're in gear 8. I'm gonna go ahead and apply that throttle. We're cruising, gaining speed, and that's gonna cap us to around 20 miles an hour. So, you know, that might be a deal breaker for a lot of folks that like cruising around with throttle only. All right, so right now I'm cruising on over to a road where we're gonna be able to test out the top speed of this bike. Now, acceleration is kind of an interesting thing here because, you know, the way that this mid-drive works, you know, I'm gonna have to be shifting through gears as I'm accelerating, but I also don't wanna be putting pressure to the pedal, so it's not gonna be much of an acceleration test, more than it is gonna be a test of the top speed that we're able to attain on this bike. All right, so for our top speed test, I'm gonna use the Draggy GPS performance monitor. I actually have a GPS unit mounted to my helmet. We're gonna use the Draggy app. We'll go ahead and reset this. And we're gonna start our speed run in 3, 2, 1, go. All right, so we're in pedal assist 1. I'm gonna take pressure off the pedals, switch gears, pressure off the pedals, switch gears, pressure off the pedals, switch gears. We'll do the same thing again. I'm gonna crank us up into pedal assist 5. All right, gear 7 and gear 8. So we're all in right now, and I am hardly putting in any effort right now, and we're cruising. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and stop our test. We'll see how we did. Be sure to downshift here. All right, folks, so on that test, it looks like we hit a top speed of 26 miles an hour. I think we can do a little bit better than that, so we're gonna go ahead and do the same thing, but in the other direction. All right, we're gonna get started in 3, 2, 1, go. All right, go ahead and switch gears. Yeah, all right, we are in gear 8, pedal assist 5. We are putting some pressure down, no ghost pedaling, folks. We're cruising around at a nice, comfortable speed. Absolutely zero ghost pedaling. The gearing on this bike is phenomenal. So I think we've pretty much maxed it out. We'll go ahead and slow down here. Start our downshift. No pressure to the pedals. All right, folks, so on this particular one, we hit a top speed of 27 miles an hour. And as I was mentioning, we had zero ghost pedaling, which is absolutely insane because most hub drive bikes that I ride around on, when you get over, 25, 26 plus miles an hour, there's a good amount of ghost pedaling involved, and you're really having to put a lot of effort to keep going at those speeds. Not so with this bike. So what I'm gonna go ahead and do is get us turned around, and we're gonna go do a light hill climb test, see how this bike does, but of course, we're gonna be following up this content with our full hill climb test up Phoenix's South Mountain. Anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and get us going. All right, so we're going over a bridge. We got a puddle of water. Thankfully, we have fenders. And if you're curious, this bike does have an IPX4 water resistance rating, which means it should be able to handle some splashes, no problem at all. All right, so this is a dog park area. We got a little bit of a incline here that we can ride up. We may even try riding this bike up some of these grassy embankments, see what that 105 Newton meters of torque is all about. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and cut across the grass here, see what the suspension feels like. The suspension on this bike is a little on the firmer side. You do have the preload adjustment, which will, help you adjust how soft or firm it is, but it is a little firm, not plush. So good news is if you're a heavier rider, I weigh about 200 pounds, there's no bottoming out or anything like that to worry about. And this is gonna be a little hill climb. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that you're gonna wanna make sure that you are in the appropriate gear working your way up the mountain, up the hill. Look at these dogs having a great time. Anyways, you're gonna wanna make sure that you are in the appropriate gear when biking up an incline. You don't wanna be changing gears when you're putting heavy force into those pedals because, you could put undue stress on the drivetrain. Hope you heard me through all of that. We had all kinds of dog action there at the dog park. But anyways, that is why it's always fun riding around through here. You get the dogs all excited. Anyways, we're gonna cruise on over to some of those grassy embankments and see how this thing does on some steeper inclines. I don't know how well you can see it here, but these are actually super steep. And so that's what we're gonna be testing this out on here in a moment. All right, so as you can see, we've got a relatively steep embankment ahead of us. I am in gear 1, pedal assist 2. I'm gonna go ahead and see how this bike does. Now, when you're going into the steep stuff, like I mentioned earlier, you don't wanna be shifting your gears, but my goodness, I mean, that was nothing. We're gonna have to find some steeper hills. Hold on a second. What else do we got here? So, I mean, that was almost no effort at all. That thing, went right up there. Oh, wow. So, mid-drive bike, you definitely get a lot of power output. So that 105 Newton meters of torque is an absolutely accurate figure. Let's see. I'm gonna cruise on through here. Once again, I am in gear 1, pedal assist 2, and we've got some steeper stuff, which I'll go ahead and measure here in a moment. But we're working our way up. All right. Putting power down. Right up and over that. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop here. We're gonna measure that incline. All right, folks, so I don't know how well you can see this, if at all, but it says 12.65 degrees. We'll switch our units. That's 22.44% grade. So absolutely insane performance out of this HeyBike Alpha climbing hills. And that's a testament to the 105 Newton meters of torque that you have. Just keep in mind, you don't want to be shifting gears when you're putting the bike under that much load, so make sure you're in the appropriate gear before you make the hill climb. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get going here and head back to where we started. But the next test that we're gonna do is our brake test. That'll give us a great opportunity to test out these hydraulic brakes. 3, 2, 1, go. Solid stopping power. So with these hydraulic brakes, you can absolutely lock out these tires. Not that you want to do that. When you lock out your tires, you're losing traction. But the beautiful thing about hydraulic brakes is that they're going to give you significantly more stopping power with less effort compared to cable actuated brakes. So we're going to go ahead and do that test again. We'll get up to speed. We'll do it in 3, 2, 1, go. Yeah, you're not gonna have any issues with braking on this bike. So not only is it a powerful bike, gets you up to those top speeds without an issue, and allows you to maintain those speeds, but it also gives you really good stopping power. That's a great combination right there. We'll go ahead and see how this thing rides in gravel. It does have these 26-inch by 4-inch fat tires. And as you can see, we're just cruising along. No issues with traction. Does give us the opportunity to test out this suspension, which, as I mentioned, you got suspension up front. It is a little on the stiffer side. No suspension in the rear. So that's one of the benefits of having a bike with 4-inch fat tires, 4-inch wide tires, is that you're gonna have exceptional grip when riding on varied surfaces, especially when you compare it to like a 2.5-inch wide or 3-inch wide tire. Now, real quick, if you're curious what that horn sounds like, here you go. That is obnoxiously loud. This thing is so loud, in fact, that I went ahead and bought myself a bell for this bike, If you're in a very loud, busy place, okay, that's fantastic, but that's gonna scare the crap out of a pedestrian. Another thing to mention is that when you push that button, it's just gonna keep on blaring that horn. You actually have to push it a second time to turn it off. So overall, I'm very happy with this bike. This mid-drive gives you basically immediate power. There is no delay. And it's a very natural ride feel. And the bike is very lightweight. It doesn't feel heavy or clunky or anything like that. And even though it's got these 26-inch by 4-inch fat tires, it is pretty nimble, I gotta say. But anyways, let me know if you have anything in particular you'd like to see me test with this bike, because this is video 1 of an entire series I'm gonna be doing. And so we've got a hill climb test planned, a range test. We're gonna do some night rides, see how the lighting is on this bike. And then at the end of it, after I've got a couple hundred miles on this thing, I'm gonna bring it all together in a comprehensive end-to-end review. Now, in terms of things that I think could use some improvement, I would like to see locking grips in the future. That would be an awesome addition. You can always add them yourself, but that'd be cool if that was included. Another thing is the suspension. It gets the job done, but it is a little more on the stiff side. You can go in there and make some adjustments to that preload. But anyways, other than that, I'm very happy with this. But anyways, if you do want to pick one of these up, I will include an affiliate link in the description below if you use that to make your purchase. Absolutely helps support this channel, keeps the wheels moving on future reviews. And as always, thank you so much for tuning into Tom's Gadget Garage. We'll see you next time.